start with a story back when I was a nursing assistant. And I was taking a class in being a certified nursing assistant. And at the end of the class, having passed, the instructor, a wonderful woman by the name of Jackie Isaacson, I believe was her name. Jackie handed everybody out evaluations, and I got a very reasonable evaluation. It was good. It wasn't anything special. But she did make, notes to work on. And one of them, I think it might have been the only one, said, doesn't take criticism well. Yeah, Stinky McDougal doesn't take criticism well, which is a lifelong thing for me. I actually got up off my chair. She said, if you have any questions, anybody, come see me. I got in line, and I said to myself, what does she mean I don't take criticism well? And it took me about 4 or 5 seconds, and I went, oh, yeah. No, I'm not taking this very well, am I? Yeah. And I wonder why, why that is. As a pattern of behavior, I'm sort of a 9th inning guy, sometimes even an 11th inning guy. I'm sort of known for pulling golf shots out of nowhere, and otherwise I'm just a wild swing. So, one, I don't take criticism well, which explains why my response to the Thunderbolts channel and their wonderful offer to read my script went sideways list this week. It's been a terrible week, if you will, because in part I don't take criticism well. And then the other part was that unfortunately someone very dear that I work with can't continue in the position, and it was a tough week. The funny thing was on Tuesday, it was like everybody was making bad moves, mistakes, if you will. I don't know. When you pair that I don't take criticism well with my arrogance, and if you want to hear that arrogance, you just have to tune into the Stone Cold Bright show, where a very cocky young man was quite arrogant about knowing everything. And it's painful to listen to that. And it's also painful to know that you can identify moments like this across my life. And so when I woke up one day and found out about this crash, you have to understand that any criticism to that thesis was not well received by me. And so that was, always one of the things that you look back on. But what was happening was I was becoming consciously aware of some of the things that were going on around me. And one of the things that I became aware of was just how active I had been in trying to do something. So I went to a meeting with a friend, Stan, and Stan had some other folks. There were probably 8 or 9 of us that met at the Log Cabin restaurant in North Hudson. And, most of the folks were Red Team folks. And, some folks were, I've posted some things on Facebook and I talked to friends. And I was like, I don't know, I've written 4 or 5 email letters to the editor that have been published. I've done this little thing or that. And it was kind of interesting that I'd been in motion. I was doing things, trying to figure out, how do I effectuate change here? Because the entry to that anger phase, right? There was a lot of energy in there. I was angry. I was going to do something. And in order to do something, as I shared in a disruptive pattern, in order to do something, I had to give up belief systems, very significant belief systems. And to do that, you had to make some decisions about how you deal with things. And one thing that I decided that I couldn't deal with was working as a financial services wholesaler, knowing not just the fragility of the system, but it's a con game. It's a pyramid scheme. It's the similarities between, easily identified failing models and what we're going through. And in fact, over and over and over, I keep looking through the news. And if you say, Bob, what similarity are you looking for? The similarity I'm looking for is the dysfunction of a system. Like, how should a system have reacted and how is it reacting? And so when we use this chart, this bubble chart, there are people who say, What's wrong with the way politics were back in the 1950s when people used to get along? Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at American history from a bubble chart, you have this bubble back here, which was the Civil War, and then you have that bubble coming to a close of wars, if you will, at the end of World War II. That's one giant bubble. But that's not the big bubble. That's just this tiny one on the corner. The 1950s were us trying to come out of that bubble after we'd sort of said, okay, let's put all politics aside. And if you look on the chart here where you see institutional investors, that's literally what happened. The corporatization of the corporatization of America occurred in this institutional phase. And so I'm looking around, I'm going, what similarities to bubbles like that do I see? And one of which is the media. Most of the media is not reporting on what they should be reporting on. Just so that history's clear, the vaccine has clearly damaged people's DNA and is clearly causing health issues, not only in newborns and infants, but in anybody who has had the jab itself or is born from a mother who's had the jab. The potentials here are incredible. And so what's continuing to become aware to me is that I identified these patterns, not just this pattern of the bubble, but I was identifying other patterns that were beginning to emerge. And so in 2012, when I was laid off, suddenly it gave me a lot of freedom in looking at the patterns that I was involved in. As long as I was working for Genworth Financial, the Alzheimer's Association, the funding of the Alzheimer's Association, and all the research being done was clearly moving in the right direction. When the reality is we may be dealing with a much larger and much more toxic issue. And that issue I'm going to do a video on coming up, which has to do with Tom DeLonge saying there are pyramids in Alaska. It just seems like there's a quickening. And so I'm trying to describe that things around me began to start taking a different form. And no form was clearer than that of the 2012 election. If you want to see me at a point in time on national TV, by the way, in 2008, when John McCain named Sarah Palin his vice president choice pick, I was actually standing on the stage for Fox News in downtown St. Paul, and I'd gone down because the week before they'd said, "Hey, we're going to be at the national convention. Come on down on, I think it was Thursday morning or something, and you can get up on a Gigadooger." And there were only like 4 or 5 or 6 of us that showed up. And they even comment, "We don't know what happened, but here you go, and you can't miss me because there's only 5 or 6 of us there." 4 years later, I'd begun re-engaging even further in politics, and so I went to the Hudson caucus, and I asked to be a delegate to the 3rd Congressional District Caucus for the Republican Party of Wisconsin. And then at that caucus, I thought I'd put my name in at the previous caucus to be a delegate to the National Convention for Ron Paul, only to find out this county chair didn't put my name on that list. I'm not making any insinuations about why I wasn't on the list, but I was disappointed when I got to the 3rd Congressional District Caucus, and suddenly I wasn't able to support Ron Paul the way I'd hoped. One of the things I loved about Ron Paul's message was that within the revolution, he had found the love. And that spoke to me in ways that a political message hadn't previously. There was something about his revolution that struck me. And later on, I'll talk about the one thing that struck me later, making the whole thing work. And so, having not been able to serve Ron Paul at the National Convention, I decided that they were looking for someone to be the representative from the 3rd Congressional District to the Republican Party's state platform committee. And so I went on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday or something like that, and I got together a bunch of white guys, maybe a couple of folks that were minorities, but a bunch of white guys in a hotel room in Green Bay. Hey, look at this, watch this, right? My family's from Green Bay. I'm in Green Bay. I'm on the platform committee. I'm in the room. We're going through the Republican Party platform, and I say, "Hey guys, we're on Social Security, and we should probably put something in here that the current model is unsustainable, and that we need to look at options to either correct it or dissolve it. And the room went apoplectic, absolutely bonkers. And the one reply, we can't do that. We're going to lose elections. And I asked the room, okay, so when do we tell people the truth? When is it worth losing an election to tell people the truth? Because it's one of the reasons I chose Ron Paul as my candidate. And the answer in the room was, not now. And so I went to the convention with my wife and my sister and her husband, I believe, at the time. And it was a completely unfulfilling experience. And it wasn't long after that the Rules Committee for the National Republican Party decided to change the number of states that a delegate had to have won in order to speak at the National Convention. Ron Paul had gotten 5 wins, and so he had qualified to speak at the National Convention for the presidency. And they changed the rule to 7. And at that moment, having gone through so many years of identifying as a Republican, as, working on campaigns and participating in events and posting and believing that they really believed about economic freedom, that even if I found the most palatable candidate who truly believed in freedom, the Republican Party would change the rules and they would never allow someone like my candidate. And so that fall, I made the decision to vote for Gary Johnson. And people said, hey, why are you wasting your vote? And they were right. Because we're coming up on the election. You shouldn't vote. And the reason is that I don't give agency to anyone over my life. And in fact, when I look around and I look at Stinky and I go, Stinky, I mean, are you just outright stinky? And the answer is no. No, I believe that there are forces in the world that are working on us. And I believe that they work on all of us in very mysterious ways. And within that, I woke up one day and said, hey, I'd like to know what's going on. And what was going on was the collapse of the entire social model. Because the 2020 election was a fail. The media failed. Our healthcare industry failed. Our universities and our schools that educated everybody failed. And like Wile E. Coyote, well over the edge of the cliff, we just don't realize it. It's my hope that you're far enough along here for me to ask you, if you haven't done it yet, send out the message that we're going to start spreading hope like fire. Peace.